They told me to disappear on Veterans Day. The one day America remembers men like me. My son typed it out cold. Give us space. Do not contact us anymore. His wife just liked the message, so I disappeared. But I did not go quietly. I pulled the floor out from under their feet. 48 hours later, my phone showed 137 missed calls. The man they wanted gone was the only man who could save them. Hello, everyone. If you are still here with me, drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. I would genuinely love to know. And before we continue, a quick note. Some details in this story have been dramatized for storytelling and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real names or situations is purely coincidental. But the lesson behind every word is absolutely real. The rain hit the windows of my apartment like 1,000 tiny fists. Seattle rain does not storm or rage. It just settles in and stays, gray and patient and relentless, like grief. I sat alone at a small wooden table in my one-bedroom apartment in Beacon Hill, staring at a single vanilla cupcake from the bakery on the corner. One blue candle sat in the center, unlit. There was no one here to sing. My name is Arthur Brennan. Most people call me Art. Today I turned 73. To the world outside this door, I am a quiet retiree, living off a modest Navy pension, the kind of old man who wears flannel shirts and drives a 12-year-old pickup truck, the kind of man people feel sorry for around the holidays. But the world does not know what I know. It does not know about the secure server in Zurich. It does not know about Compass Holdings, the private equity shell I built when I retired from the Navy 15 years ago. It does not know that the man in this small damp apartment controls a portfolio worth north of $55 million. I built that fortune the same way I built everything. Quietly, strategically, and without asking for applause. 40 years in the United States Navy teaches you that the loudest ship in the fleet is usually the first one to sink. I wanted my son Nathan to learn that lesson on his own. So I hid the money. I wore the flannel. I drove the old truck. I let him believe his father was a pensioner who clipped coupons and worried about heating bills. And when Nathan started his logistics company, Harbor Tech, I became his invisible safety net. Through Compass Holdings, I funneled $45,000 every month into his business and personal accounts. I paid his mortgage on Mercer Island. I covered the lease on his Range Rover and his wife Sloane's Mercedes. I funded the unlimited credit cards Sloane used to build her influencer brand. Nathan thought all of that came from his own genius. He walked through life with his chin tilted up, believing he was a self-made man who had conquered the Seattle tech scene at 35. He had no idea his entire empire was a sandcastle, and I was the tide holding itself back. But today was not about money. Today was Veterans Day. I had given the Navy the best years of my life. I had commanded destroyers through Pacific storms that would make most men pray. I had buried friends whose names are etched in stone at Arlington. I had earned every scar, every medal sitting in the shadow box on my bookshelf. All I wanted was to hear my son's voice. I picked up my phone and opened the family group chat. It had been silent for weeks. I typed slowly, my thumbs stiff from the cold. Happy Veterans Day, son. I am sitting here thinking about you. I would love to hear your voice today, even just for a minute. Love, Dad. I hit send. The message turned blue. Delivered. I set the phone on the table next to the cupcake and waited. 1 minute passed, then 5, then 20. The rain kept tapping at the glass, filling the silence with its patient drumming. I told myself he was busy. I told myself he was in a meeting or driving. I made excuses for him, the way I had been making excuses for 35 years. Then the phone buzzed. My heart jumped. I grabbed it, fumbling with the cracked screen protector. A message from Nathan. For one foolish second, I thought he had remembered. I thought the boy I once carried on my shoulders through the 4th of July parade had finally looked up from his spreadsheets long enough to remember the man who taught him to tie his shoes. I read the message. Dad, stop living in the past. We have talked about this. You are being suffocating. We need space from you. Do not contact us anymore. We will reach out when we are ready. Below his message, a small notification appeared. Sloan liked the message. I stared at the screen for a long time. The words blurred and then sharpened, but not from tears. My eyes were dry. The pain was deeper than tears could reach. It lived in the marrow, in the part of a man that remembers holding his newborn son and whispering, "I will never let anything hurt you. Stop living in the past." He said that to a man who spent 40 years in the past so his son could have a future. He said that on Veterans Day. I set the phone down. I looked at the cupcake. The unlit candle sat in the frosting like a tiny headstone. I picked it up and dropped it into the trash. Something shifted inside me. It was not sadness. Sadness was an old shipmate who had sailed with me for years. This was different. This was cold. It was the feeling I used to get in the Combat Information Center when the radar showed an incoming threat, and every soul on that ship looked to me for the order. It was clarity. The absolute silence before the thunder. They wanted space. They wanted distance from the man who had kept them afloat their entire lives without them ever knowing they were in the water. I stood up and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark room, casting long shadows across the wall where my shadow box hung. Inside that box were 3 bronze stars, a purple heart, and the Admiral's insignia I had worn the day I retired. Relics of a man who followed orders, who sacrificed, who put everyone else first. That man was drowning tonight. And something older, something harder, something forged in the fire of 40 years of command, was rising to the surface. The Admiral had surfaced. I typed in the 30-character password to the Zurich banking portal. The biometric scanner read my thumb. The screen flashed green. Access granted. I navigated to the sub-account labeled Compass Holdings. Beneficiary: Nathan Brennan. The cursor blinked on a small green button that read, Status active. If they wanted space, I would give them the vastest, coldest, most unforgiving emptiness they had ever known. The kind of space that exists between stars, where sound cannot travel and no one can hear you scream. My hand did not tremble. That is something people always get wrong in the movies. They show the moment of decision as a shaking finger hovering over a red button, sweat dripping, music swelling. But when you have spent 4 decades making life and death calls in the middle of the ocean, your hands learn to be still when your heart is not. The cursor sat on the green button. Status active. Below it, the transaction history of Compass Holdings scrolled down the screen like the logbook of a ship I had been captaining in secret for nearly a decade. I leaned back in my chair and read the numbers the way I used to read navigational charts. Carefully, completely, and without sentiment. The sub-account labeled Nathan Brennan, personal, showed a recurring monthly transfer of $45,000. It had been active for 8 years, 106 consecutive months of deposits that my son believed came from revenue generated by his logistics startup, Harbor Tech. He had no idea that Harbor Tech's largest client, a mysterious investment group called Compass Holdings, was not a venture capital firm staffed with analysts and board members. It was me. One man, sitting in a dark apartment, wearing flannel. I clicked on the transaction breakdown and read it line by line. The mortgage payment for the 5-bedroom house on Mercer Island, $14,000 a month. The lease on the Range Rover Sport, $1,800. The lease on Sloan's Mercedes GLE, $2,200. The automatic payment to Sloan's personal credit card, which she used to fund her lifestyle brand, fluctuated between $15,000 and $20,000 a month, depending on how many designer handbags she decided the world needed to see on her social media feed. It was all there: the trips to Cabo, The spa weekends in Scottsdale, the $300 brunches, the matching Cartier bracelets she posted about with the caption "Blessed and grateful." Blessed by my checking account. Grateful for my silence. I scrolled further. The operating expense account for HarborTech showed another layer of dependency. Payroll funding, office lease in Pioneer Square, server costs, marketing budget. Every month, Compass Holdings wired an additional $35,000 to keep the lights on in my son's company. Nathan signed the checks that paid his employees, but the money in those checks came from me. He was the captain of a ship that someone else built, someone else fueled, and someone else kept from sinking. For 8 years, I had watched from the shadows. I had read every quarterly report. I had quietly guided his business decisions through encrypted emails sent from a Compass Holdings address he never thought to trace back to his own father. When his first product launch failed, I doubled the funding. When his lead engineer quit, I arranged for a replacement through a recruiting firm I secretly owned. When the pandemic nearly killed his revenue, I injected an emergency $200,000 to cover 3 months of payroll. He never knew. He stood at conferences and talked about resilience and self-reliance and the grind of being a founder. He gave interviews about how he built HarborTech from nothing. And every time I watched those interviews from this small kitchen table, I felt a complicated mix of pride and sadness. Pride because the company existed. Sadness because the man running it had no idea how fragile his foundation really was. I had done all of this for one reason. I wanted Nathan to develop character. I wanted him to feel the weight of responsibility without the safety net being visible. I thought that if he believed he was doing it on his own, he would eventually become the kind of man who actually could. I thought struggle, even simulated struggle, would build something real inside him. I was wrong. Instead of character, I had built a monument to entitlement. Nathan did not develop grit. He developed arrogance. He did not learn gratitude. He learned to expect. And the woman he married, Sloan, a corporate attorney turned influencer who traded her bar license for a ring light, had only accelerated the rot. Together, they had constructed a life that looked like success from the outside, but was hollow at the core. A beautiful ship with no engine, drifting on a current of my money. And tonight, on the one day I asked for nothing but a phone call, they had told me to disappear. I looked at the green button one last time. I thought about the boy Nathan used to be. I thought about the afternoon I taught him to sail on Lake Washington, how he laughed when the wind caught the jib and the boat lurched sideways. I thought about the morning I dropped him off at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, how he stood at the gate in his new uniform, looking so young and so terrified and so determined. He lasted 2 years before he quit, telling me the military was not his path. I accepted that. I never judged him for it, but I judged him now. Not for quitting the Navy, not for choosing business over service. I judged him for the casual cruelty of that text message. I judged him for the breathtaking ingratitude of telling his father to stop living in the past on the day the nation honors its past. I judged him for building a throne out of my sacrifice and then looking down at me from it. The green button pulsed on the screen. I moved the cursor over it. A dialog box appeared. Warning. Deactivating this account will immediately suspend all scheduled transfers and freeze all linked credit lines and operating accounts. This action cannot be undone without manual reauthorization. Are you sure? I did not hesitate. I did not close my eyes. I clicked yes. The screen refreshed. The green button turned to a flat gray. Suspended. 8 years of invisible life support. Gone in a single click. I had launched missiles in the Pacific that caused less damage than that one keystroke. I was not finished. I navigated to the credit card management portal. 3 cards linked to the trust. Sloan's Unlimited Black Card. Nathan's Platinum Business Card. A secondary gold card used for household expenses. All 3 showed status active. I selected them. I clicked Report Lost and deactivate immediately. Then I pulled up the HarborTech operating account. As the sole investor through Compass Holdings, I had full administrative access. I selected Freeze all assets pending audit. I closed the laptop. The screen went dark. The room returned to silence. But it was a different silence now. The heavy, suffocating loneliness that had pressed against my chest all evening was gone. In its place was something I had not felt in years. It was the calm that comes after you have given the order and the ship has turned, and there is nothing left to do but wait for the horizon to change. I walked to the window. The rain was still falling over Seattle, blurring the city lights into soft, wet streaks of gold and white. Somewhere out there, 12 miles across the water on Mercer Island, my son and his wife were probably finishing a bottle of expensive wine, laughing about how they had finally put the old man in his place. They had no idea that the tide had just gone out. And when the morning came, they would discover that they had been standing on sand the entire time. 12 miles across the water, in the amber glow of the most celebrated restaurant in Seattle, my son was raising a glass to freedom. I know this because his wife was broadcasting every second of it to 50,000 strangers. I watched through the screen of my phone as Sloane panned her camera across the long table at Canlis, the legendary fine dining room perched on the edge of Queen Anne Hill, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Union. The table was draped in white linen, surrounded by 25 guests, a carefully curated collection of business partners, angel investors, tech journalists, and the kind of social parasites who attach themselves to anyone with an open bar tab. Crystal chandeliers cast warm pools of light across their faces. The fireplace crackled softly in the background. Outside the windows, the lights of the Aurora Bridge reflected on the black water like scattered coins. It was the kind of setting designed to make people feel important. And my son was soaking in every drop of it. Nathan sat at the head of the table wearing a bespoke Navy suit that I had paid for through Compass Holdings 3 weeks ago. His face was flushed from champagne, his gestures wide and theatrical, performing the role of visionary CEO for an audience that was only there for the free dinner. He stood up, tapping his knife against his crystal flute. The table went quiet. "I want to make a toast," Nathan announced, his voice carrying the polished confidence of a man who had never once earned the right to be that confident, to growth, to independence, and to finally cutting the dead weight. A cheer erupted around the table. Glasses clinked. Someone whistled. Sloane turned the camera toward herself, her lips painted in a sharp burgundy, her eyes gleaming with the particular satisfaction of a woman who believes she has won a war she never actually fought. "You guys?" she said to her live audience, her voice dripping with rehearsed vulnerability. "Today was a big day for us. We had to set some really hard boundaries with family. Tyler's dad is just so stuck in the past. He is a sweet old man, but he is suffocating us. He thinks because he served in the military 100 years ago, the world owes him something. We had to finally tell him that we need space. It was so hard but so necessary." She wiped a perfectly dry eye with one manicured finger. The comments rolled by in a stream of heart emojis and affirmations. "So proud of you, Queen. Boundaries are self-care. You deserve peace." I sat in my dark apartment watching this performance, my coffee growing cold in my hands. There was my son, celebrating the night he told his father to disappear, in a restaurant that cost more per plate than most veterans receive in a week of pension. There was his wife, monetizing my rejection for likes and subscribers, turning my loneliness into content. The dead weight. That is what he called me. The man who had carried him his entire life was dead weight. I watched Nathan gesture to the sommelier. He did not look at the wine list. He did not ask for a recommendation. He simply snapped his fingers, a gesture that made my stomach tighten, and said loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Bring us the Opus 1, the 2015, and keep it flowing for the entire table." I knew that wine. I knew the price. $450 a bottle. With 25 guests, he would need at least 6 bottles, probably more. That was nearly $3,000 in wine alone, on top of the tasting menu that ran $275 per person. He was burning through money the way a destroyer burns through fuel in a storm, fast and reckless, and with absolute faith that the supply ship would always be waiting just over the horizon. He did not know that the supply ship had just turned around. Sloan swung the camera back to the table. Nathan was now standing again, one arm around a man I recognized as his chief technology officer, the other holding his glass high. The Breitling Navitimer on his wrist caught the candlelight. I had given him that watch when he graduated from college, after he left the Naval Academy. I had it engraved on the back. "Fair winds and following seas, Dad." It was a Navy blessing, a wish for safe passage. He wore it every day, not because of the sentiment, but because it was worth $22,000 and he liked the way people looked at it. Harbor Tech just closed its best quarter in company history, Nathan declared, his voice booming with pride that belonged to someone else. Revenue is up 40%. We are expanding into military logistics contracts, and none of it, not a single dollar, came from anyone but us. The table erupted in applause. People raised their glasses. The tech journalist in the corner was furiously taking notes. Sloan beamed, pulling Nathan down for a kiss that was clearly staged for the camera. I turned off the live stream. I had seen enough. 40% revenue increase. Military logistics contracts. He was bragging about numbers that existed only because I had engineered them from behind a curtain. The military contract he was so proud of was one I had quietly facilitated through a retired admiral friend who owed me a favor. The revenue increase was the direct result of a $200,000 marketing injection I had authorized through Compass Holdings last quarter. Every number he quoted was my number. Every achievement he celebrated was my achievement. He was a ventriloquist's dummy, performing for an audience that did not know there was a hand up his back. And now he was ordering $450 bottles of wine to celebrate cutting the strings. I looked at the clock on my wall. It was 9:47 in the evening. In roughly 90 minutes, give or take the speed of a dessert course and the arrival of the check, my son was going to reach into his jacket pocket and pull out the heavy black credit card that he believed was invincible. He was going to toss it onto a silver tray, with the casual arrogance of a man who had never once looked at a bill. And for the first time in his adult life, the machine was going to say no. I poured the cold coffee into the sink. I did not need caffeine. The anticipation was enough. Somewhere across the water, the most expensive dinner of my son's life was reaching its final course. The sommelier was uncorking the 5th bottle. The laughter was getting louder. The tips were getting bigger. And the bill, sitting quietly in the kitchen like a torpedo in its tube, was approaching $32,000. Nathan did not know it yet, but he had just ordered his last supper on someone else's tab. The check was coming, and for the first time in his life, there was no one on the other end to cover it. The bill arrived the way all consequences arrive, quietly, on a silver tray, tucked inside a leather folio that the waiter placed at Nathan's elbow with the practiced discretion of a man who has delivered 1,000 small grenades to 1,000 oblivious generals. Nathan did not open it. He did not glance at the total. He simply reached into the inside pocket of his Navy suit, pulled out the heavy black titanium card, and tossed it onto the tray without breaking eye contact with the tech journalist across from him. "Add 30% for the staff," Nathan said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "They earned it tonight." The waiter bowed and disappeared into the kitchen corridor. The table continued to buzz with laughter. Sloan was showing her diamond tennis bracelet to the woman beside her. Nathan leaned back in his chair, surveying his kingdom with the satisfied gaze of a man who believed the feast would never end. 5 minutes passed. Then 8. The waiter returned. But his walk was different. The smooth glide was gone, replaced by a stiff, reluctant stride. He leaned down to Nathan's ear. "I am very sorry, sir. The card has been declined." Nathan laughed. A sharp, reflexive bark. "That is impossible," he said loud enough to turn heads. "That card has no limit. Run it again." We ran it 3 times, sir. The bank flagged it as reported lost or stolen. Do you have an alternate form of payment? The laughter at the table began to die. Conversations trailed off. People set down their glasses. Nathan reached into his wallet and pulled out 2 more cards, a platinum and a gold, fanning them on the table. Try these. One of them will work. Will? The waiter gathered the cards and walked away. The silence thickened. A few guests exchanged glances. The angel investor checked his phone. The tech journalist quietly closed her notebook and slid it into her bag. 3 minutes later, the waiter returned with the general manager. She was a tall woman with silver hair and a face carved from decades of handling difficult situations with surgical calm. She looked down at Nathan the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray she does not like. "Mr. Brennan," she said, her voice low but carrying enough edge to silence every whisper. "All 3 cards have been deactivated. The banks flagged them as compromised. We require valid payment for $32,417. If you cannot settle tonight, we will contact the authorities." The number landed on the table like an anchor. Nathan's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, shame, and then the panicked scan of a man searching for an exit that does not exist. The guests began to leave. It happened the way it always happens when a company announces bankruptcy. The peripheral connections departed first, murmuring about early mornings and babysitters, avoiding Nathan's eyes. Then the middle ring followed, colleagues who could smell catastrophe. Within minutes, the table of 25 had shrunk to 2, Nathan and Sloan, surrounded by empty chairs and half-finished glasses of $450 wine. Sloan's live stream had ended the moment the first card was declined. Her 50,000 followers watched the opening act, but missed the collapse. Her face was pale, her eyes darting between Nathan and the manager, with the frantic calculation of a woman whose survival instincts were activating faster than her pride. "Pay it," she hissed through clenched teeth. "Fix this." Now, Nathan stared at the 3 dead cards on the white linen. The confident CEO who had toasted to independence 2 hours ago was gone. In his place sat a man discovering that confidence without capital is just noise. "I have a watch," Nathan said quietly. He reached for his left wrist. His fingers found the clasp of the Breitling Navitimer, the watch I had given him when he graduated college. He turned it over. The engraving caught the candlelight. "Fair winds and following seas, Dad." A Navy blessing, a father's hope for safe passage. He had worn it every day for 13 years. Now he was unclasping it to pay for a dinner he could not afford. He placed it on the table. The manager picked it up and inspected it with detached professionalism. She turned it over, read the inscription, and for a brief moment something flickered across her face. "This will serve as temporary collateral," she said. "You will sign a promissory note for the full balance. 48 hours to return with cash or the watch becomes our property and we file a civil claim." Nathan signed the paper. His hand left a smear of sweat across the page. He signed away the only gift from me he had ever worn close to his body, traded a father's blessing for an escape from a room of people who had already abandoned him. Sloan grabbed her clutch and stood. Her chair scraped the hardwood like a small scream. She pulled out her phone and dialed. I watched the screen of my phone light up in my dark apartment. Sloan calling. The vibration hummed against the wooden table where the cupcake had sat hours ago. I pictured her in that restaurant, mascara threatening to run, the manager looming, the empty chairs judging. She needed the suffocating old man now. She needed the dead weight to anchor her back to safety. I let it ring 5 times. Then I reached out and silenced it. The screen went dark. They wanted space. I was simply honoring the request. The front door of Canlis opened, and my son stepped into the Seattle night. The rain hit his suit immediately, darkening the expensive fabric, plastering his hair to his forehead. Sloan followed, stumbling slightly on the wet pavement in her heels. There was no car waiting. No valet with an umbrella. The Range Rover was parked across the city. its lease funded by an account that no longer existed. They stood on the sidewalk in the rain, two people who had spent the evening celebrating independence now discovering what independence actually felt like. Below them, the black water of Lake Union reflected nothing, and in the distance, a ferry horn echoed across Puget Sound, low and mournful, the kind of sound that carries for miles over open water and reminds you just how far from shore you really are. The clock on my wall read 0100 hours. Old habits. 40 years in the Navy, and I still read time in military format. Still wake before dawn without an alarm. Still refer to the kitchen as the galley when I am tired. The rain had intensified outside, drumming against the windows with a fury that matched the engine turning over inside my chest. I picked up my phone, not to check Sloane's missed calls, not to read whatever desperate texts Nathan had surely started sending. I picked it up to dial the one number that mattered tonight. Victor Hale answered on the second ring. He always did. Victor was not the kind of man who slept through a crisis. He was a former JAG officer, a Navy lawyer who had spent 20 years prosecuting war crimes and defending admirals in courts martial. He had the legal mind of a chess grandmaster and the bedside manner of a torpedo. I had kept him on retainer for 15 years. Not because I expected trouble, but because a good commander always has a battle plan for weather he hopes will never come. "Victor," I said. "It is time." Clause 9. There was a pause. I heard the faint click of a desk lamp being switched on, followed by the rustle of paper. Victor never used a computer for sensitive conversations. He kept everything on physical documents, locked in a fireproof safe. "Clause 9, he repeated, his voice low and precise. "Full asset recovery. That means the house, the vehicles, the operating shares, everything titled to the trust. Once I file these motions, Conrad, there is no reversal without your explicit written consent. You understand what this means for your son." "I understand what it means for the man my son has become," I replied. "I want it all back, Victor. Every asset legally titled to the Brennan family trust. I want the house on Mercer Island secured. I want the vehicles repossessed. And I want HarborTech's voting shares frozen under my authority as majority stakeholder." "Tonight?" Victor asked. "Before the sun comes up," I said. "I want them to wake up in a world they actually own, which according to my records is nothing but their names and the clothes on their backs." There was a brief silence. Then Victor spoke with the clipped efficiency of a man shifting into operational mode. "The repo teams are on standby retainer. I will dispatch them within the hour. The eviction notice will be drafted and couriered to the Mercer Island address at first light. I will also file an emergency motion to freeze utilities under the trust's name. Power and water should be cut by 0500. "Good," I said. "And Victor, make sure the eviction notice is printed on orange paper. I want it visible from the street." "Understood," he said. And then, with the faintest trace of something that might have been admiration, he added, "Fair winds, Admiral." I hung up and set the phone on the desk. The apartment was dark and still. The only sound was the rain and the distant hum of the city settling into sleep. Somewhere across Lake Washington, in the quiet, affluent neighborhood of Mercer Island, Nathan and Sloane were probably stumbling through their front door right now, soaked and shaken from the restaurant disaster, telling themselves it was just a banking error, a glitch that the old man would fix with a phone call in the morning. They would pour themselves a drink. They would argue for a while. Then they would collapse into their king-sized bed with its 800 thread-count sheets and fall into the deep, exhausted sleep of people who have never once questioned the ground beneath their feet. They did not know that the ground was about to be pulled away. At 0200 hours, the first truck arrived on Mercer Island. I was not there, but I knew the procedure. Victor's repo teams operated with military precision because half of them were former military. Two unmarked flatbed tow trucks rolled down the tree-lined street with their headlights dimmed, amber hazard lights pulsing softly against the rain-soaked pavement. They did not use sirens. They did not knock on the door. They moved like submarines, silent and deliberate, surfacing only long enough to strike. The first truck backed into the driveway and positioned itself in front of the silver Range Rover Sport. The driver, a large man in a waterproof jacket, hopped out and worked quickly. Chains hooked to the front axle. Winch engaged. The vehicle lifted off the concrete with a mechanical groan, its wheels spinning uselessly in the air for a moment before going still. 12 seconds. That is all it took to erase a $60,000 symbol of success. The second truck went for Sloane's white Mercedes GLE, the car she used as a backdrop for half her social media content. It was loaded in under 2 minutes. The driver checked the straps, climbed back into the cab, and pulled away. The amber lights disappeared around the corner, swallowed by the rain and the darkness. Inside the house, nothing stirred. The bedroom windows stayed dark. Nathan and Sloane slept through their own repossession the way they had slept through every consequence I had quietly absorbed on their behalf for the past 8 years. The chains rattling in the driveway, the hydraulic whine of the winch, the wet scrape of tires being dragged across concrete. None of it reached them. They were dreaming the deep, dreamless sleep of the entitled, wrapped in sheets bought with my money, inside walls owned by my trust, breathing air heated by my accounts. Not for much longer. At 0500, the utilities were cut. Somewhere in a control room, a technician processed the order from the Brennan Family Trust and flipped the switches. Power, water, gas, all severed simultaneously. The smart home system that controlled the thermostat, the security cameras, the automated blinds, and the voice-activated lighting died in an instant. The radiant floor heating, set to a comfortable 72 degrees, began its slow descent toward the temperature of the concrete beneath it. The house was still standing, but it was no longer alive. At 0630, as the first gray light of a Seattle morning began to bleed through the clouds, a courier van pulled up to the front of the Mercer Island house. A man in a rain jacket stepped out, walked to the mahogany front door, and taped a bright orange document directly at eye level. He pressed it flat, smoothing out the edges, making sure it was impossible to miss. Then he returned to his van and drove away without looking back. The document read, "Notice to vacate. Property of the Brennan Family Trust. Occupants have no lease, no title, and no legal right of possession." I stood at my window in Beacon Hill, watching the rain lighten as dawn crept over the Cascades. My coffee was black and hot. My phone sat silent on the desk. For the first time in 8 years, not a single dollar was leaving my accounts. The invisible river of money that had kept my son's world spinning had been dammed, diverted, and dried up. By the time they opened their eyes this morning, the heating would be gone. The water would be gone. The cars would be gone. The house they believed was theirs would have an orange eviction notice taped to its face like a scarlet letter. They had asked for space. I had given them the ocean. Dawn broke over Puget Sound in a thin line of pale copper, the kind of fragile light that barely survives the weight of Seattle's permanent cloud cover. I stood at the window of my apartment holding a mug of black coffee, watching the city slowly surface from the rain like a submarine rising to periscope depth. The storm had passed. The air was clean and cold. And for the first time in 8 years, not a single automated transfer had left my accounts overnight. I turned from the window and picked up my phone from the desk. The screen lit up like a distress signal. 137 missed calls. I sat down and scrolled through the notification history. It was a timeline of collapse, a digital chronicle of two people watching their world disintegrate in real time. The calls started at 11:14 the previous night, right after the restaurant. The first 3 came from Nathan. Then a gap of 20 minutes, followed by a cluster from Sloane. By midnight, they were alternating. One calling while the other left voicemails I had no intention of listening to. I opened the text thread instead. The messages told the story more efficiently than any voicemail could. At 11:22, Nathan wrote, "Dad, there is a problem with the bank. All the cards got flagged. Call them and sort this out. It is embarrassing. At 12:15, the tone shifted. This is not funny. If this is about the text I sent earlier, you are being ridiculous. Fix the cards now. At 1:40, desperation crept in. Dad, please answer your phone. We are stranded. We had to give the restaurant a watch as collateral. A watch. Do you understand how humiliating that was? Call me back. Then silence for 2 hours. I imagined them collapsing into bed, convincing themselves it was a banking error, a technical glitch that would resolve itself by morning. At 5:17, the panic detonated. The power is out. The water is off. Something is wrong with the house. Dad, what is happening? Call us now. At 5:31, from Sloan. The cars are gone. Someone took the Range Rover and the Mercedes. They are not in the driveway. We called the police, and they said the vehicles were legally repossessed. That is impossible. Conrad, please answer. At 6:48, from Nathan. There is an orange notice on our front door. It says we have to vacate. It says the house belongs to your trust. Dad, what have you done? I set the phone down and took a sip of coffee. The liquid was hot and bitter and exactly right. 12 miles away on Mercer Island, the scene I was reading about in text form was playing out in full catastrophic color. I was not there, but I could reconstruct it with perfect accuracy because I had orchestrated every detail. Nathan woke first. He would have reached for the thermostat on his nightstand, the glass touchscreen that controlled the radiant heating throughout the house. The screen was dead. Black. He would have sat up, confused, his breath forming a visible cloud in the bedroom air. The temperature inside had been dropping since 5 in the morning, when the gas and electric were severed. By the time he opened his eyes, the house was already approaching 50 degrees and falling. He would have called out for Sloan. And from the master bathroom, a scream would have answered. Not terror. Frustration. The kind of sound a woman makes when she turns a gold-plated faucet handle and nothing comes out. Not a drip. Not a hiss. Nothing. The pipes were dry. The water heater was cold. The smart home system that controlled the lights, the locks, the security cameras, and the automated blinds was completely offline. The house was still standing, but it was a shell, a 5-bedroom mausoleum with no pulse. Nathan would have grabbed his phone next. No Wi-Fi. The router was dead, along with everything else. He would have switched to cellular data and tried to load the utility accounts, but realization would have struck before the page finished loading. The utilities were not in his name. They had never been. They were registered to the Brennan Family Trust. I could picture him running down the grand staircase in his boxers, feet slapping against the cold hardwood, heading for the garage. He would have hit the automatic opener. Nothing. No power. He would have fumbled in the dark for the manual release cord, yanked it down, cursing, and heaved the heavy door upward with both hands. Gray morning light would have flooded the cavernous space, revealing absolutely nothing. 2 empty oil stains on the concrete where $60,000 worth of German and British engineering had sat just hours earlier. Gone. Taken in the night while they slept in sheets that did not belong to them inside a house they never owned. Then the front door. He would have thrown it open and there it was. Bright orange paper taped at eye level. Impossible to miss. Screaming against the dark mahogany wood. Notice to vacate. Property of the Brennan Family Trust. Occupants have no lease, no title, and no legal right of possession. Continued occupancy constitutes trespassing under Washington state law. Nathan would have read it twice. 3 times. His hands trembling in the cold morning air. He would have looked at Sloan, standing behind him in the doorway wrapped in a cashmere robe that cost $3,000, but could not keep her warm without a furnace to back it up. We do not own this house, he would have whispered. We never did. He told us it was a wedding gift, but the deed stayed in the trust. We are just tenants, Sloan. And our lease just expired. I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug in the sink. Then I sat down at my laptop and opened my email client. I composed a new message. To Nathan Brennan and Sloan Brennan. Subject line. Re-space. I typed slowly, making sure every word carried the weight it deserved. Dear Nathan and Sloan, I received your message yesterday regarding your need for space and independence. I spent the night reflecting, and I realize you are absolutely right. Boundaries are essential. Independence is necessary. Therefore, effective immediately, I am granting you the total space you requested. I have removed myself completely from your financial lives to ensure you have the freedom to succeed entirely on your own merits without my suffocating influence. The vehicles, the house, and the monthly support were clearly holding you back from your true potential. Per your request, I will not reach out again. I trust you will navigate the logistics of your new independence with the same confidence you displayed last night. Respectfully, Dad. I read it once. It was polite. It was professional. It was devastating. I hit send. Then I closed the laptop and turned off my phone. The hunt was over for the morning. Now it was time to watch them run. Nathan arrived at HarborTech headquarters at 9:47 in the morning. I know this because Victor Hale's security team logged the exact timestamp. I was not there. I did not need to be. Every detail reached me within minutes, relayed through a calm, factual phone call from Victor himself. And every detail confirmed what I already knew. My son had no idea how small his world had become overnight. The Uber dropped Nathan at the curb of the Westlake Tower on Elliott Avenue. He was wearing yesterday's Navy suit, the same one from Canlis. The collar was creased. The tie was gone. Sloan was not with him. According to Victor, Nathan walked through the revolving glass doors the way he always did. Shoulders back, jaw set, chin tilted 3 degrees above level. I taught him that posture when he was 12. Stand like the room belongs to you, I told him. He learned the posture. He never learned that the room has to actually belong to you first. He crossed the lobby toward the executive elevator bank. The building's lobby was a cathedral of polished concrete and reclaimed timber, designed to impress the venture capitalists and Department of Defense liaisons who visited HarborTech's 7th floor suite. Nathan pressed his key fob against the sensor panel beside the elevator. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. The small LED light that should have turned green stayed red. He pressed it a third time, harder, as though force could change the answer. It could not. Rex Calloway, the building's senior security officer, approached from the front desk. Rex was 61 years old, a retired King County Sheriff's deputy with a gray crew cut and a handshake that could crack walnuts. He had worked Westlake Tower security for 9 years. He knew Nathan by name. He knew Nathan's coffee order, and as of 6:15 that morning, he knew that Nathan Brennan's access credentials had been revoked by the building's leaseholder. The leaseholder was Compass Holdings. The leaseholder was me. Rex explained the situation in the professional, measured tone of a man who had delivered bad news 1,000 times before. Sir, your access fob has been deactivated. I have been instructed to inform you that entry to the 7th floor is restricted pending an administrative review by the property management company. Rex did not say Compass Holdings. He did not say my name. He simply said property management company, because that was what Victor Hale had instructed him to say. Keep it institutional. Keep it cold. Remove the personal from every interaction. Nathan did not take it well. He raised his voice first. He told Rex that he was the chief executive officer of HarborTech Logistics and that he had 43 employees on the 7th floor who reported to him. Rex nodded and repeated the same sentence almost word for word. Sir, your access has been deactivated pending administrative review. Nathan demanded to speak with building management. Rex explained that building management had issued the directive and that all inquiries should be directed to the legal contact on file. Nathan asked who the legal contact was. Rex handed him a printed card. The card read, Victor Hale, Hale and Whitmore, attorneys at law. Below the name was a downtown Seattle address and a phone number. Nothing else. No explanation. No apology. Nathan stared at the card for 11 seconds. Victor's team timed it from the security camera footage. 11 seconds of silence. Then Nathan pulled out his phone and dialed the number on the card. Victor answered on the second ring because Victor always answers on the second ring. It is a deliberate choice. Not too eager. Not too slow. Controlled. The conversation lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Victor recorded it with Nathan's knowledge. Washington State is a two-party consent jurisdiction. And Victor informed Nathan at the start of the call that the line was being recorded for legal purposes. Nathan did not object. He was too angry to think about what that meant. Victor laid it out with the precision of a man reading coordinates from a navigation chart. Mr. Brennan, your office lease at Westlake Tower is held by Compass Holdings, LLC. As of 0600 this morning, your building access has been suspended, pending a financial audit of all Compass Holdings subsidiaries. Additionally, I have been authorized to serve you with a temporary protection order on behalf of my client, Arthur Brennan. The order requires you to maintain a distance of 500 feet from my client's residence in person. A physical copy will be delivered to your current address of record within the hour. Nathan's voice cracked. Victor told me that later, and even through the professional filter, I could hear something in Victor's tone that resembled sympathy. Nathan asked one question that mattered. He asked who owns Compass Holdings. Victor paused. 2 full seconds. Your father, he said. Your father has owned it since the day it was incorporated. Every dollar that flows through HarborTech's operating account originates from a Compass Holdings subledger. The lease on this building, the server contracts, the insurance policies, the payroll bridge loans during your first 3 years. All of it traces back to one source. There was a long silence on Nathan's end. Victor waited. He is very good at waiting. Nathan hung up without another word. According to the lobby camera, he stood in the Westlake Tower entrance for 2 full minutes after the call ended. He held the business card in his left hand and his dead phone in his right. Rex Calloway remained at his post, watching but not approaching. The revolving door spun behind Nathan as other tenants entered and exited, moving around him as though he were a stone in a river. Then Nathan walked back out into the Seattle morning. The sky was the color of old steel. A fairy horn sounded somewhere on the sound. He turned left on Elliott Avenue and started walking north, toward the waterfront, toward nothing in particular. Inside my apartment, my phone buzzed once. A text from Victor. Package delivered. He knows. I set the phone down and looked out at the gray water. Somewhere across that sound, my son was learning a lesson I should have taught him 30 years ago. The wind does not care whose sail it fills, and the man who owns the harbor decides which ships come home. Nathan was out of the building, but he was not out of moves. Men like my son, men who learned ambition without learning gratitude, they do not retreat. They escalate. I had served long enough to recognize the pattern. When a vessel loses power, the crew does not sit still. They look for any port, any alliance, any anchor. Nathan would find his anchor soon enough. And when he did, I would be ready. They ended up at the Rainier Lodge. I know this because Victor's investigator, a quiet former naval intelligence officer named Dex Moreno, followed them from the moment Nathan left Westlake Tower. Dex was thorough. He logged the Uber receipt, the check-in time, the room number. He even noted that Nathan paid with cash. $47 a night. That was the distance between a Mercer Island estate and a roadside motel on Highway 99. $47 and one phone call from an old man they wanted to forget. The Rainier Lodge sat between a tire shop and a pawn store in Tukwila, 12 miles south of downtown Seattle. It was the kind of place that kept the bathroom light on a timer and bolted the television to the wall. The parking lot had 9 cars in it, mostly older sedans with cracked windshields and expired tabs. Nathan's Uber pulled in at 8:30 in the evening. Sloane stepped out first. She was wearing the same ivory Valentino dress from the canless dinner, now wrinkled across the back. Her heels clicked against the wet asphalt, then stopped. She looked at the motel sign, a flickering neon rectangle, missing the letter E, and did not move for several seconds. Nathan walked past her and into the front office without a word. Dex sat in a rented Honda Civic across the street. He sent me a photograph of the motel's exterior. The fluorescent office light cast a yellow rectangle across the wet lot. I studied that photograph for a long time. My son, the chief executive officer of Harbor Tech Logistics, the man who ordered 6 bottles of Opus 1 12 hours earlier, was checking into a motel that charged by the hour. I did not feel satisfaction. I want to be honest about that. What I felt was closer to the hollow sensation you get when a depth charge detonates beneath the surface. The explosion is down there, somewhere deep, and the water barely ripples on top, but you know something just died below the waterline. They checked into room 14. Dex confirmed this with binoculars from across the street. The curtain was thin enough that he could see 2 silhouettes moving inside. At 9:15, the silhouettes stopped moving and appeared to sit on opposite sides of the room. Dex noted this in his log. Separate corners. That detail mattered more than it seemed. According to the audio that Dex captured from a parabolic microphone aimed at the window, the argument began at 9:22. Sloane spoke first. Her voice was tight and controlled, the voice of a woman who had spent years managing her public image and understood that volume was not the same as power. She told Nathan that this was his fault. She told him that she had warned him about the text message, about telling his father to stop reaching out. She said she had told him to keep the old man close, keep him comfortable, keep the money flowing. She used those exact words. Keep the money flowing. Dex recorded every syllable. Nathan fired back. He told Sloane that she had liked the message. He reminded her that she had tapped that little heart icon without hesitation. She said liking a message was not the same as writing it. He said it was worse because it meant she agreed, but did not have the courage to say it herself. The argument circled for 11 minutes, each of them blaming the other for the same decision they had made together. Then the conversation shifted. Sloane's tone changed. She lowered her voice, which meant Dex had to increase the gain on his microphone. She told Nathan that they needed a strategy. She said fighting with each other was pointless, and that the real problem was sitting in a Pike Place apartment, watching them drown. She said the old man had clearly lost his mind. No rational person would destroy their own son's livelihood over a text message. She said the behavior was erratic, paranoid, and vindictive. She used the word incompetent. Then, she used the word conservatorship. I need to explain what that word means for people who have never encountered it in a legal context. A conservatorship is a court order that strips a person of their legal right to manage their own finances and personal decisions. A judge appoints a conservator, usually a family member, who gains control over the person's bank accounts, property, medical choices, and daily life. It is designed to protect individuals who genuinely cannot care for themselves. The elderly, the severely impaired, people with advanced cognitive decline. It can also be weaponized. A healthy, competent person can be placed under conservatorship if the right doctor signs the right paperwork and the right lawyer files the right petition. It has happened before. It will happen again. And that night, in room 14 of the Rainier Lodge, my daughter-in-law suggested using it against me. Nathan was quiet for a long time after Sloane said it. Dex noted 14 seconds of silence on the recording. Then Nathan asked how. Sloane said she knew someone, a doctor who had helped a friend's family with a similar situation, a psychiatrist who understood that diagnosis was sometimes a matter of perspective rather than science. His name was Dr. Keith Mercer. He practiced out of a private clinic in Bellevue. He was expensive, but flexible. Flexible was the word she used. Nathan asked what flexible meant. Sloane said it meant Dr. Mercer could evaluate someone and reach the conclusion that the situation required, provided the family was willing to compensate him for his professional judgment. Nathan said nothing for another 8 seconds. Then he said 2 words. Call him. Dex sent me the recording at 11:41 that night. I listened to it once, sitting in my kitchen with the lights off and the sound turning black outside my window. I listened to my son agree to have me declared mentally incompetent. I listened to him choose a cage for his father. Then I set the phone down, opened my laptop, and composed a message to Victor Hale. The subject line read, "Condition Bravo." The body contained 3 words. "They are coming." Sloan made the call at 10 in the morning. Dex Moreno was parked outside the Rainier Lodge in the same rented Honda Civic parabolic microphone aimed at the thin curtain of room 14. The recording quality was remarkable. I could hear the bedspring creak when Sloan sat down. I could hear Nathan breathing near the window. I could hear the exact moment Dr. Keith Mercer picked up the phone and said good morning in a voice so warm and professional it could have belonged to a man who actually cared about his patients. Sloan introduced herself. She said a friend had referred her. She did not name the friend. She described the situation in careful, rehearsed language. "My father-in-law is 73 years old. He is a retired military officer. He lives alone. Recently, he has exhibited erratic and aggressive financial behavior. He terminated financial support for his only son without warning or rational explanation. He revoked access to a family business. He initiated legal actions that appear disproportionate and vindictive. We are concerned about cognitive decline." She spoke for 3 minutes without interruption. Mercer listened. Then he asked one question. "Has your father-in-law been evaluated by a physician within the past 12 months?" Sloan said no. Mercer said that was helpful. He said the absence of a recent evaluation meant there was no existing baseline to contradict a new assessment. He used the phrase, "clean slate." As though my mind were a chalkboard, he could write whatever he wanted on. Nathan spoke next. He asked Mercer directly whether an evaluation could result in a conservatorship filing. Mercer paused for 2 seconds, then asked if the call was being recorded. Nathan said no. Mercer said good. Then his tone shifted. The professional warmth dropped away like a mask falling from a nail. He said that in his experience, a detailed neuropsychological evaluation combined with testimony from concerned family members could support a petition for temporary conservatorship. He said the key was documentation. Medical notes, behavioral observations, a pattern of irrational decision-making. He said he could conduct a 90-minute evaluation at his Bellevue clinic and produce a report within 48 hours. Nathan asked how much. Mercer said his standard evaluation fee was $4,500. Then he added that a comprehensive report suitable for court submission required additional analysis. The total would be $15,000. Nathan did not hesitate. He said fine. Sloan asked one more question. She asked what would happen if Arthur Brennan refused to be evaluated. Mercer laughed softly. He said refusal to cooperate with a medical evaluation was itself evidence of impaired judgment. He said the court would view it as a red flag. He said they could file an emergency petition requesting a court-ordered evaluation, and a sympathetic judge would likely grant it within 72 hours. He told them not to worry. He said he had done this before. He had done this before. That sentence sat in my chest like a stone. I listened to the full recording at 12:15 that afternoon. Victor Hale sat across from me at my kitchen table. He had arrived at 11:30 with a leather briefcase and a legal pad already half covered in notes. Dex had transmitted the audio file to Victor's encrypted server at 10:41, 11 minutes after the call ended. By the time Victor reached my apartment, he had already listened to it twice and flagged 7 statements that constituted potential fraud, conspiracy, and abuse of legal process. Victor set his phone on the table and played the recording from the beginning. I listened without moving. I heard Sloan describe me as erratic. I heard Nathan ask about conservatorship as though he were ordering a service from a catalog. I heard Mercer laugh about refusal being evidence. When the recording ended, Victor looked at me and asked how I wanted to proceed. I told him I wanted Mercer on tape saying something worse. Victor nodded slowly. He explained the strategy in plain terms. Washington State required 2-party consent for recordings, which meant Dex's parabolic capture of a phone call inside a motel room existed in a legal gray area. It could be challenged in court. It could be suppressed. We needed something cleaner. We needed Mercer to repeat his intentions in a setting where the recording was unambiguous and legally admissible. Victor proposed that I attend the evaluation. Walk into Mercer's clinic in Bellevue. Sit in the chair. Answer the questions. But before I walked in, Victor would file a notice with the Washington State Medical Quality Assurance Commission flagging Mercer for potential ethical violations. This would create a formal paper trail. Then Dex would install a concealed recording device on my person. Washington's two-party consent law applied to private conversations, but Victor argued that a medical evaluation conducted for the purpose of filing a legal petition existed in a quasi-public context. He had case law to support it. He had 3 precedents from King County alone. I asked Victor what he needed from me. He said he needed me to be calm. He said he needed me to answer Mercer's questions. Honestly, clearly, and completely. He said the goal was not to trick Mercer but to give Mercer enough rope to hang himself. If Mercer was legitimate, the evaluation would show a competent 73-year-old man with no cognitive impact. If Mercer was corrupt, he would twist my answers, fabricate symptoms, and produce a fraudulent report. Either way, we would have the recording. I agreed. Victor made 2 phone calls. The first was to Dex, instructing him to prepare the recording equipment. The second was to a forensic psychiatrist named Dr. Helen Vasquez at the University of Washington Medical Center. Victor asked her to be available as a rebuttal expert in the event that Mercer's evaluation contained fabricated findings. She said yes without hesitation. Victor closed his briefcase and stood. He looked at me with the expression of a man who had seen this kind of cruelty before, but had never grown comfortable with it. "We spring the trap on Friday," he said. "Do not contact your son before then. Do not respond to any messages. Let them believe you are falling apart." I walked Victor to the door. After he left, I stood in my kitchen and looked at the phone on the table. The recording was still loaded on the screen. I could have played it again. I chose not to. Some things you only need to hear once to remember forever. My son had hired a man to declare me insane. My response would be to let him try. The summons arrived at 8 in the morning on Friday. A process server in a gray polo shirt knocked on my apartment door 3 times, handed me a manila envelope, and asked me to confirm my name. I said Arthur Brennan. He said, "You have been served," and walked away without looking back. He had already forgotten me before he reached the elevator. I was just another name on his Friday morning route. I carried the envelope to the kitchen table and set it beside my coffee. The envelope was thin. That surprised me. I had expected something heavy, something thick, with legal language and exhibits and declarations. But the machinery designed to strip a man of his freedom weighed less than a dinner menu. I opened it carefully, the way I used to open sealed orders aboard ship. Slow hands, clear eyes, no assumptions about what was inside. The document was titled, "In the Matter of the Conservatorship of Arthur J. Brennan." Petitioner, Nathan R. Brennan. Filed in King County Superior Court. Case number 24-2-09817. The petition requested that the court appoint Nathan as temporary conservator over my person and estate, citing evidence of cognitive decline, erratic financial behavior, and an inability to manage personal affairs without risk of substantial harm. Attached to the petition was a 2-page declaration from Dr. Keith Mercer. The declaration stated that Dr. Mercer had reviewed records provided by the family and conducted a preliminary behavioral assessment. He concluded that Arthur J. Brennan exhibited signs consistent with early-stage frontotemporal dementia, characterized by impulsive decision-making, disproportionate emotional responses, and a deteriorating capacity for financial judgment. He recommended a full court-ordered neuropsychological evaluation and immediate appointment of a temporary conservator to prevent further dissipation of assets. I read the declaration twice. Then I read it a 3rd time. Mercer had never examined me. He had never sat across from me. never asked me a single question, never looked into my eyes, and tested my memory or my reasoning. He had produced a clinical assessment based on nothing. He had diagnosed a man he had never met, and he had signed his name to it under penalty of perjury. I called Victor Hale at 8:22. He answered on the second ring. I read him the case number and the key paragraphs from Mercer's declaration. Victor was silent for several seconds. Then he asked me to read the declaration one more time, slowly. I did. When I finished, he exhaled and said one word. Good. I asked him what was good about being accused of dementia by a doctor who had never examined me. Victor said the declaration was good because Mercer had overplayed his hand. A legitimate psychiatrist would never issue a clinical conclusion without a direct evaluation. Mercer had filed a diagnosis based on second-hand reports from the petitioner's family. That was not medicine. That was a transaction. And transactions leave evidence. Victor told me the hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. 5 days. He said that gave us enough time to execute the plan. He walked me through the sequence. One more time. Step 1. I would attend a voluntary neuropsychological evaluation at the University of Washington Medical Center on Monday morning. Dr. Helen Vasquez would administer a comprehensive battery of tests. The evaluation would take approximately 3 hours and would cover memory, executive function, language processing, spatial reasoning, and behavioral assessment. Victor said Vasquez was one of the top forensic neuropsychiatrists in the Pacific Northwest. Her testimony had been accepted in over 40 conservatorship cases across 3 states. If she cleared me, her report would be a wall that Mercer's paper diagnosis could not climb over. Step 2. On Tuesday, Dex Moreno would deliver the recording of Mercer's phone call with Nathan and Sloan to the Washington State Medical Quality Assurance Commission. The complaint would allege that Mercer had agreed to produce a predetermined diagnosis in exchange for $15,000. The commission would open a formal investigation. This would not affect Wednesday's hearing directly, but it would place Mercer under official scrutiny. If Mercer appeared in court on Wednesday, any testimony he offered would carry the weight of a man already under investigation for fraud. Step 3. I would attend the evaluation at Mercer's Bellevue Clinic on Tuesday afternoon. This was the step that mattered most. Victor had arranged for Dex to fit me with a concealed recording device. A small microphone embedded in the collar of my jacket, transmitting to a receiver in Dex's vehicle, parked 1 block from the clinic. I would sit in Mercer's office, answer his questions truthfully, and let him conduct whatever examination he chose. The goal was simple. Let Mercer reveal himself. If he asked leading questions, if he steered the conversation toward predetermined conclusions, if he fabricated symptoms that did not exist, the recording would capture all of it. Victor said the recording would be our depth charge, delivered below the surface where no one could see it coming. Detonated in open court where everyone could hear it. I spent the rest of Friday alone. I did not check my phone. I did not open my laptop. I sat in my chair by the window and watched the ferries cross the Sound. White shapes moving against gray water. And I thought about what it meant to have your own son petition a court to take away your mind. Not your money. Not your house. Your mind. The thing that makes you who you are. The thing that holds every memory, every decision, every lesson, learned across 73 years of living. Nathan wanted a judge to declare that my mind was broken so that he could reach into my accounts and take back what he believed was his. He believed wrong. On Monday, I would sit in Dr. Vasquez's office and prove that my mind was a fortress. On Tuesday, I would walk into Mercer's clinic, wearing a wire. On Wednesday, I would stand in a courtroom and show a judge exactly what my son had done. 3 days. 3 steps. 1 chance to end this. King County Superior Court sits on 3rd Avenue in downtown Seattle. The building is a rectangle of gray stone and tinted glass. 12 stories of decisions that change lives. I arrived at 8:45 in the morning wearing a navy blue suit, a white shirt, and a tie the color of deep water. Victor Hale walked beside me carrying a single leather briefcase. He did not bring a rolling cart of boxes. He did not bring a paralegal. He brought one briefcase and the confidence of a man who had already won a case the other side did not know was lost. We passed through the metal detector on the ground floor. The security officer asked me to remove my belt. I did. I collected my things on the other side and followed Victor to the elevator. We rode to the 4th floor in silence. Courtroom 4C. The Honorable Judge Patricia Langford presiding. Victor had told me about Langford the night before. 17 years on the bench. Former family law attorney, known for patience with elderly petitioners and zero tolerance for procedural shortcuts. He said she was fair. He said fair was all we needed. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. 2 counsel tables facing the bench. A witness stand to the left. A gallery with 6 rows of wooden pews. The American flag stood in the corner beside the Washington state flag. The room smelled like floor polish and old paper. It smelled like consequence. Nathan was already seated at the petitioner's table when we entered. He wore a charcoal suit I had never seen before. It did not fit well. The shoulders were slightly too wide, which told me he had borrowed it or bought it off a rack in a hurry. Sloane sat directly behind him in the first row of the gallery, wearing a black dress and minimal jewelry. She looked composed. She looked like a woman who had rehearsed her expression in a mirror that morning. Their attorney was a man named Craig Dunleavy. I had never heard the name before, and Victor told me that was intentional. Dunleavy was a mid-tier estate attorney from Bellevue who handled conservatorship cases on volume. He filed 15 to 20 petitions per year. He won most of them because most of them were uncontested. Elderly people without resources, without advocates, without someone like Victor Hale standing beside them. Dunleavy made his living on silence. He was about to learn what happened when silence fought back. Judge Langford entered at 9 o'clock sharp. The bailiff called the room to order. We stood. She sat. She opened a folder and read the case caption aloud. In the matter of the conservatorship of Arthur J. Brennan, she looked at Dunleavy and asked him to present the petitioner's case. Dunleavy stood and buttoned his jacket. He spoke for 11 minutes. I timed it on the courtroom clock. He described me as a 73-year-old retired military officer living alone in downtown Seattle with no close family contact and no regular medical supervision. He said I had exhibited a pattern of erratic and destructive financial behavior over the preceding week, including the termination of long-standing family financial arrangements, the revocation of business access, and the seizure of personal property belonging to my adult son. He said these actions were disproportionate, irrational, and consistent with the early stages of cognitive decline. Then he called Nathan to the stand. My son walked to the witness chair and raised his right hand. He swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The bailiff asked him to state his name. Nathan Robert Brennan. The bailiff asked him to be seated. Nathan sat. He folded his hands on the wooden rail in front of him and looked directly at Dunleavy. He did not look at me. Not once. Dunleavy asked Nathan to describe his relationship with his father. Nathan said it had been difficult for several years. He said I was increasingly isolated, withdrawn, and prone to sudden, extreme decisions. He said I had become suspicious of family members and had begun using financial control as a weapon. His voice was steady. His answers were smooth. He had practiced. Dunleavy asked Nathan to describe the events of the previous week. Nathan said he had sent me a respectful message asking for temporary space in our relationship. He said my response was to immediately terminate all financial support, revoke his access to his own office, repossess his vehicles, cut off his utilities, and serve him with a protection order. He said the reaction was wildly disproportionate to a simple request for boundaries. He said he was scared for me. He said he believed I was not well. Nathan paused and lowered his voice. He said that his mother had died 11 years ago, and that since her death, I had gradually withdrawn from the world. He said I lived alone in a small apartment surrounded by naval memorabilia, talking to almost no one. He said he feared I was disappearing into myself and that the financial attacks were a cry for help from a man who no longer understood his own actions. It was a performance. Every word was calibrated to create a portrait of a fragile, declining old man lashing out at the people who loved him. Nathan delivered it with precision. He even paused at the right moments to suggest emotion he did not feel. I recognized the technique. I had watched politicians use it in Senate hearings. I had watched defense contractors use it in Pentagon briefings. Controlled vulnerability. Strategic grief. Dunleavy thanked Nathan and told the judge he had no further questions for this witness. Nathan remained on the stand. Judge Langford looked at Victor and asked if he wished to cross-examine. Victor stood. He adjusted his glasses. He picked up his briefcase and set it on the counsel table. He unlatched it with 2 soft clicks that sounded, in the silence of that courtroom, like the arming of a weapon. "Your Honor," he said, "I have a few questions for Mr. Brennan. And then, with the court's permission, I have something I would like everyone in this room to hear." Judge Langford nodded. Victor turned to face my son. Victor did not rush. He never does. He stood 3 feet from the witness stand and looked at Nathan the way a sonar operator watches a blip on a screen. Patient, certain, already knowing where the target was before the ping returned. He began with small questions. "Mr. Brennan, you stated that you sent your father a respectful message asking for space. Is that correct?" Nathan said yes. Victor asked if he could read the exact message aloud for the court. Nathan hesitated for half a second, then said yes. Victor lifted a printed sheet from his briefcase and read it slowly. "Stop living in the past. We need space from you. Do not contact us anymore." Victor paused. He looked at Judge Langford, then back at Nathan. "Would you characterize that as a respectful message, Mr. Brennan?" Nathan straightened in the chair. He said context mattered. He said the relationship had been strained and that the message was an honest expression of his needs. Victor nodded and moved on. He asked Nathan whether Sloan had responded to my Veterans Day text. Nathan said he was not sure. Victor produced a second printout, a screenshot showing that Sloan Brennan had liked the message. Not replied. Not offered an alternative. Liked it. The way you like a photograph of someone's lunch. Victor let the screenshot sit on the projector screen for 6 seconds. Judge Langford glanced at it, then looked at Sloan in the gallery. Sloan did not move. Victor shifted topics. He asked Nathan to describe HarborTech's financial structure. Nathan said, HarborTech was an independent logistics company that he had founded and built. Victor asked who funded the initial launch. Nathan said he had secured private investment. Victor asked from whom. Nathan paused. He said from various sources. Victor asked him to name one. Nathan said the information was proprietary. Victor turned to Judge Langford. Your Honor, I would like to enter Exhibit 4 into evidence. A certified financial summary prepared by the Forensic Accounting Division of Hale and Whitmore, documenting all capital transfers from Compass Holdings LLC to HarborTech Logistics between 2016 and 2024. The total is $4,700,000. Dunleavy stood and objected. He said the financial records were irrelevant to the conservatorship petition. Judge Langford looked at him for 2 seconds, then overruled the objection. She said the petitioner had cited the respondent's financial behavior as evidence of incompetence, which made the respondent's financial history directly relevant. Victor continued. He asked Nathan if he was aware that Compass Holdings was the sole source of HarborTech's operating capital for its first 3 years. Nathan said he was not aware. Victor asked if Nathan was aware that the lease on HarborTech's office at Westlake Tower was held by Compass Holdings. Nathan said he was not. Victor asked if Nathan was aware that his personal mortgage, his vehicle leases, and his wife's credit card payments had been funded through a sub-account managed by Compass Holdings for the past 8 years. Nathan said no. Victor asked Nathan who owned Compass Holdings. Nathan did not answer. Victor repeated the question. Nathan said he did not know. Victor said the answer was in Exhibit 5. He placed a single sheet on the projector. The incorporation documents for Compass Holdings LLC, filed with the Washington Secretary of State in 2015. Sole member and managing director, Arthur J. Brennan. The courtroom was quiet. Judge Langford wrote something on her notepad. Nathan stared at the screen. His jaw tightened. His right hand gripped the wooden rail of the witness stand hard enough to turn his knuckles white. Victor was not finished. "Your Honor," he said, "I would now like to play an audio recording for the court." This recording was captured on day 3 of the events in question, during a phone conversation between Nathan Brennan, Sloan Brennan, and Dr. Keith Mercer. A formal complaint regarding Dr. Mercer has been filed with the Washington State Medical Quality Assurance Commission. The complaint number is on file with the court clerk. Dunleavy objected again. He argued the recording was obtained without consent. Victor responded calmly. He said the recording was captured by a licensed private investigator operating in a lawful surveillance capacity. He cited 3 King County precedents involving audio evidence in conservatorship fraud cases. Judge Langford studied the case citations for 45 seconds, then allowed the recording. Victor pressed play. The courtroom speakers carried Sloan's voice first. Clear and unmistakable. "She described me as erratic. She asked Mercer about conservatorship. Then Mercer's voice filled the room. He talked about a clean slate. He talked about producing a report suitable for court submission. He quoted $15,000. He laughed about refusal being evidence. He said he had done this before." Then Nathan's voice. 2 words that landed in the courtroom like stones dropped into still water. "Call him." Judge Langford stopped writing. She removed her glasses and set them on the bench. She looked at Nathan on the witness stand. She looked at Sloan in the gallery. She looked at Dunleavy, who had placed both palms flat on the table as though steadying himself on a sinking deck. Victor spoke into the silence. "Your Honor, I also submit Exhibit 7. A complete neuropsychological evaluation of Arthur J. Brennan, conducted Monday by Dr. Helen Vasquez at the University of Washington Medical Center. Dr. Vasquez administered a 3-hour battery of cognitive tests. Her conclusion is unambiguous. Arthur J. Brennan shows no signs of cognitive impairment, dementia, or diminished capacity. His executive function scores rank in the 94th percentile for his age group. His memory, language, and spatial reasoning are fully intact." Victor paused. The man they want declared incompetent scored higher on cognitive tests than most adults half his age. Judge Langford looked at her notepad for a long time. Then she looked at Nathan. "Mr. Brennan," she said, "you may step down. I have heard enough." Nathan stood from the witness chair. His legs did not seem steady. He walked back to the petitioner's table and sat down beside Dunleavy without a word. Sloan reached forward from the gallery and touched his shoulder. He did not turn around. Judge Langford spoke. "This petition is denied." Judge Langford did not leave the bench after denying the petition. She removed her glasses, cleaned them with a cloth she kept beside her water glass, and put them back on. The courtroom remained silent. Nobody stood. Nobody gathered their papers. The air in courtroom 4C had changed. It was heavier now, charged with something that had not yet been spoken. She looked at Victor. "Counselor," she said, "is there anything further you wish to present to the court?" Victor stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I respectfully request permission to enter additional exhibits related to financial irregularities discovered during the preparation of my client's defense. These exhibits are relevant to potential criminal conduct by the petitioner and may warrant referral to the appropriate federal authorities." Dunleavy was on his feet before Victor finished the sentence. He objected. He said the conservatorship hearing was concluded and that any additional matters should be filed separately. Judge Langford looked at Dunleavy for 3 seconds without speaking. Then she said that the petitioner had opened the door to financial scrutiny by alleging that the respondent's financial behavior was evidence of incompetence. She said she would allow Victor to present his exhibits. She told Dunleavy to sit down. Victor opened his briefcase and removed a folder. He placed 6 documents on the projector one at a time. Each one landed on the screen, like a depth check. Exhibit 8. A wire transfer record showing that Nathan Brennan had moved $380,000 from HarborTech's operating account to a personal brokerage account at Charles Schwab over a 14-month period. The transfers were labeled consulting fees but corresponded to no consulting contracts on file with HarborTech. Exhibit 9. A second wire transfer record showing that $215,000 had been moved from HarborTech to an LLC registered in Sloan Brennan's name. The LLC was called Coastal Influence Media. It had no employees, no clients, and no revenue. It existed only to receive money from HarborTech. Exhibit 10. An email exchange between Nathan and a man named Derek Fong, HarborTech's chief financial officer. In the exchange, Nathan instructed Fong to reclassify the transfers as marketing expenses and to backdate the invoices to match the previous fiscal quarter. Fong's reply was a single word: done. Exhibit 11. A contract between HarborTech and the United States Department of Defense for maritime logistics support along the Pacific Northwest Corridor. The contract was worth $1.8 million annually. Attached to the contract was an internal HarborTech memo showing that Nathan had inflated equipment costs by 32% on 3 consecutive quarterly reports submitted to the Defense Department. Exhibit 12. A forensic accounting summary prepared by Victor's firm showing that the total amount of misappropriated funds across all channels was approximately $2.4 million over 3 years. Victor let the last exhibit sit on the screen for 10 full seconds. Then he turned to Judge Langford. "Your Honor," he said, "these documents indicate a pattern of embezzlement, wire fraud, falsification of government contracts, and money laundering through a shell corporation. My client Arthur Brennan discovered these irregularities during a routine audit of Compass Holdings subsidiary accounts. It was this discovery, not cognitive decline, that prompted my client to freeze HarborTech's operating funds and revoke the petitioner's access to Compass Holdings resources." Victor paused. "My client did not act out of confusion or dementia. He acted because he found $2.4 million missing from accounts that he owned and that his son had been entrusted to manage." Judge Langford turned to Nathan. "My son was sitting at the petitioner's table with his hands flat on the surface. His face was the color of the paper in front of him." Dunleavy whispered something in his ear. Nathan did not respond. The judge spoke carefully. "Mr. Brennan," she said, "I am not a criminal court. I do not have jurisdiction to adjudicate the allegations presented in these exhibits. However, I am required by law to refer credible evidence of financial fraud involving federal contracts to the appropriate authorities. I will be forwarding these exhibits to the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Washington and to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Seattle Field Office." She looked at Nathan one more time. "I strongly advise you to retain criminal defense counsel," she said. "This matter is no longer within my courtroom." Then she looked at the gallery. Sloan was sitting perfectly still. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her phone was face down on the pew beside her. For the first time since the hearing began, her composure had cracked. I could see it in her eyes. Not fear exactly. Recognition. The recognition of a person who has just realized that the ground beneath them was never solid. Judge Langford struck her gavel once. "Court is adjourned." The bailiff opened the side door. The judge gathered her folder and exited through the back. The courtroom emptied slowly. Dunleavy shook Nathan's hand and left without speaking to us. Sloan stood, walked to Nathan, and took his arm. They moved toward the exit together. Nathan looked at me as he passed our table. It was the first time he had looked at me all morning. His eyes held something complicated. Anger, shame, and somewhere beneath both of those, a thin, almost invisible thread of understanding. He did not speak. Neither did I. Victor and I remained seated until the room was empty. The projector was still on, casting a blue rectangle of light against the white screen. The exhibits were gone. The images had dissolved. But the numbers remained in the court record: $2.4 million. 18 federal charges waiting to be filed. A son who had tried to cage his father and instead built his own cell. Victor closed his briefcase. He looked at me and said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "The FBI will move fast. Probably within the week." I nodded. Outside the courthouse, the Seattle sky was clearing for the first time in days. A strip of blue cut through the gray above Puget Sound. I stood on the steps and breathed salt air and waited for nothing. There was nowhere I needed to be. The war was almost over. What remained was aftermath. Sloan fired the first shot at 7 in the morning. She posted a video to Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube simultaneously. The thumbnail showed her sitting on the edge of a bed in what appeared to be the Rainier Lodge. Eyes red, mascara deliberately smudged, wearing a plain white t-shirt instead of her usual designer wardrobe. The title read, "My father-in-law destroyed our lives because we asked for space." The video was 19 minutes long. I watched every second of it from my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold before the halfway mark. She spoke directly into the camera in a low, trembling voice. She said that Arthur Brennan, a wealthy retired military officer, had systematically dismantled his own son's life as punishment for a simple boundary request. She said he had frozen their bank accounts, repossessed their cars, cut off their utilities, and evicted them from their home. She said he had hired expensive lawyers to intimidate them in court. She said he had weaponized his money to control and abuse his family. She called it financial elder abuse in reverse. She said the system was designed to protect powerful men like Arthur Brennan, and that nobody was protecting the victims of his cruelty. She cried twice during the video. Both times at moments that felt precisely timed. The first was when she described sleeping in a motel. The second was when she said Nathan had been denied access to his own office by armed security guards. Rex Calloway was not armed. He carried a flashlight and a radio. But accuracy was not the point of the video. Emotion was. By 9 in the morning, the video had 400,000 views. By noon, it had crossed 1.2 million. The comments section split into two factions. Half the viewers believed Sloan completely. They called me a monster, a narcissist, a tyrant who used money as a leash. The other half smelled something wrong. They pointed out the production quality, the rehearsed pauses, the absence of any documentation. They asked why a woman claiming to be homeless was filming on a professional ring light with studio audio. The hashtag Sloan Tells Her Truth trended on 3 platforms by early afternoon. So did a counter hashtag, Arthur Brennan Story. I did not create it. I did not ask for it. But someone, somewhere, had started asking questions I had not yet answered publicly. Victor called me at 2:15. He told me not to respond directly. He said engaging with social media while federal referrals were pending would be reckless. I agreed. But Victor also understood that silence in a digital war was the same as retreat. People do not interpret quiet as dignity. They interpret it as guilt. We needed a response that was factual, measured, and devastating, without saying a single word about the court proceedings or the FBI. Victor proposed a simple strategy. 1 advertisement. 1 page. 1 set of numbers. By 4 in the afternoon, a 30-second video ad was live on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Victor's media consultant, a woman named Rachel Park, had produced it in under 2 hours. The ad contained no narration, no music, no images of me or my family. It showed a white screen with black text, scrolling slowly from bottom to top. The text displayed 8 years of monthly bank statements from Compass Holdings to Nathan Brennan's personal accounts and to Harbor Tech Logistics. Every transfer was listed with a date, an amount, and a description. Mortgage payment, vehicle lease, credit card settlement, operating capital, insurance premium. At the bottom of the scroll, a single line appeared in larger font. Total financial support provided by Arthur J. Brennan to his son Nathan R. Brennan between 2016 and 2024. $3,800,000. Below that, one more line. Arthur Brennan asked for nothing in return. His son asked him to disappear. The ad ended. No call to action. No website. No logo. Just numbers and one sentence. Rachel told Victor the ad would perform best with minimal promotion. She was right. By 6 in the evening, the ad had been shared organically over 200,000 times. News outlets picked it up. A Seattle Times reporter posted the bank statement totals alongside a screenshot of Sloane's video. The juxtaposition was brutal. On one side, a woman crying about cruelty. On the other, $3.8 million in documented support. The comment sections turned, slowly at first, then all at once. People who had defended Sloane began asking harder questions. Why did Nathan need $45,000 a month from his father if Harbor Tech was successful? Why was Sloane's company Coastal Influence Media funded by Harbor Tech? Why had Nathan tried to have his father declared incompetent 1 week after being cut off financially? By 8 in the evening, Sloane's original video had accumulated 12,000 negative comments. Her follower count, which had peaked at 310,000 that afternoon, began dropping. Sponsors reacted within hours. A skincare brand called Loom issued a statement terminating their partnership with Sloane Brennan effective immediately. A fitness apparel company called Vitesse followed 30 minutes later. By 11 that night, 4 sponsorship deals totaling approximately $95,000 in annual income had been canceled. Sloane posted a follow-up video at 11:14. It was shorter. 3 minutes. She was angrier this time. She accused me of manipulating public opinion with money. She said the bank statements were fabricated. She said I was running a smear campaign to cover up years of emotional abuse. She did not provide evidence. She provided volume. It did not work. The internet had already chosen its narrative. The hashtag #ProtectOurVeterans appeared at 11:40 and trended nationally within the hour. Veteran advocacy groups shared the bank statement ad with captions calling for accountability. A retired Marine colonel with 2 million followers posted a video calling Sloane's accusations disgraceful and demanding a public apology. I turned off my phone at midnight. The apartment was dark. The sound was black outside my window. Somewhere in Tukwila, in a motel room that cost $47 a night, Sloane Brennan was learning that the internet giveth and the internet taketh away. She had started a war in a medium she thought she controlled. She had forgotten the first rule of naval engagement. Never fire on a vessel whose ammunition you have not counted. The FBI came on a Wednesday, exactly 1 week after Judge Langford forwarded the exhibits. Victor had said they would move fast. He was right. They always are, when federal contracts are involved. The Department of Defense does not forgive theft from its own ledger. It prosecutes. And it makes examples. 2 agents arrived at the Rainier Lodge at 6:30 in the morning. Dex Moreno was parked across the street when it happened. He called me 4 minutes later. His voice was flat and professional, the way it always was when he delivered facts that carried weight. He said 2 black Suburbans pulled into the motel parking lot. He said 4 agents exited, 2 from each vehicle. He said they wore dark blue windbreakers with FBI and yellow block letters across the back. He said they knocked on the door of room 14 3 times. He said Nathan opened the door in a gray t-shirt and basketball shorts. He said Sloane was standing behind Nathan near the bathroom. He said the lead agent identified himself and read Nathan his rights. He said Nathan did not resist. He said Nathan placed his hands behind his back and was handcuffed without incident. He said Sloane began recording on her phone until a second agent instructed her to put the device down. Dex said Nathan was placed in the back seat of the first Suburban. He said the vehicle left the parking lot at 6:42. He said Sloane remained in the doorway of room 14 for approximately 3 minutes after the vehicles departed. Then she stepped back inside and closed the door. I thanked Dex and ended the call. I was standing at my kitchen window. The ferries were running their morning routes across the Sound. White shapes against dark water. I watched them for a long time. There should have been something dramatic about that morning. An orchestra, a thunderclap, some cinematic punctuation to mark the moment my son was taken away in handcuffs. But the world does not score your tragedy. The ferries ran, the coffee cooled, the gulls circled the pier below my window, and my son rode through Seattle in the back of a federal vehicle with his wrists bound behind him. The indictment was unsealed 3 days later. 18 counts. Wire fraud. Embezzlement of federal contract funds. Money laundering through coastal influence media. Falsification of government invoices. Conspiracy to commit conservatorship fraud. The document was 47 pages long. I read every page. Victor sat across from me while I read, and did not say a word. Nathan's bail hearing took place the following Monday. The federal magistrate set bail at $750,000. Nathan could not post it. His accounts were frozen. Compass Holdings was locked. Sloan had no independent assets. Dunleavy had withdrawn as counsel within 24 hours of the arrest. Nathan was assigned a federal public defender named Sarah Okafor. She was young and competent and had no illusions about the case. She told Nathan the evidence was overwhelming and recommended cooperation. Nathan refused to cooperate for 11 days. He sat in the Federal Detention Center on Airport Way South in Seattle and said nothing to anyone. Okafor visited him 3 times during that period. Each visit lasted less than 30 minutes. On the 12th day, Nathan agreed to a plea negotiation. The plea deal took 3 weeks to finalize. The government dropped 6 of the 18 counts in exchange for Nathan's guilty plea on the remaining 12. The charges he admitted to included 4 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of embezzlement of federal contract funds, 2 counts of money laundering, 2 counts of falsifying government documents, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit conservatorship fraud. The maximum combined sentence was 22 years. The prosecution recommended 8 years. Okafor argued for 4, citing Nathan's lack of prior criminal history, his cooperation after the initial holdout, and the absence of any violent conduct. Dr. Keith Mercer was arrested separately on the 14th day. The Medical Quality Assurance Commission had suspended his license 3 days after Victor filed the complaint. Federal agents added charges of conspiracy and filing a fraudulent medical declaration with a state court. Mercer's attorney negotiated a plea within a week. Mercer received 18 months in a minimum security facility and permanent revocation of his medical license. The man who diagnosed a stranger with dementia for $15,000 would never practice medicine again. Derek Fong, HarborTech's chief financial officer, cooperated immediately. He provided the FBI with complete access to HarborTech's internal accounting systems and testified before a grand jury. In exchange, he received a deferred prosecution agreement with 2 years of supervised probation. Fong's testimony corroborated every exhibit Victor had presented in courtroom 4C. Nathan's sentencing hearing was held on day 47. I attended. I did not want to, but I believed I owed it to the process and to my own conscience. I sat in the 3rd row of the gallery in the Western District Federal Courthouse on Stewart Street. Victor sat beside me. The courtroom was larger than Judge Langford's. Higher ceilings. More wood. The seal of the United States District Court hung on the wall behind the bench. Nathan stood before the judge in a khaki jumpsuit and handcuffs. Okafor spoke on his behalf for 12 minutes. She described a young man who had been given too much too soon and had made catastrophic decisions under financial pressure. She asked for leniency. The prosecution spoke for 8 minutes. They described a pattern of deliberate fraud sustained over 3 years, targeting both a private benefactor and the federal government. The judge considered both arguments. Then he sentenced Nathan Robert Brennan to 72 months in federal prison, 6 years, with eligibility for supervised release after 54 months for good behavior. Nathan would serve his sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Sheridan, Oregon. Nathan turned around as the marshals led him toward the side door. He looked at me across the courtroom. His eyes were different from the last time. The anger was gone. The shame was still there. But it was quieter now. Underneath it was something I had not seen in his face since he was a boy, standing on the deck of my sailboat for the first time. It was the look of a person who has just realized how deep the water actually is. He did not speak. I did not speak. The door closed behind him. 72 months. That was the distance between my son and the world he had tried to take from me. Sloane filed for divorce on the day after the sentencing. Her attorney submitted the paperwork to King County Family Court before noon. The petition cited irreconcilable differences, which is the legal phrase people use when the actual reasons are too ugly to print. She did not visit Nathan at Sheridan. She did not write to him. She did not mention his name in any of the 4 social media posts she published that week, each one carefully crafted to reposition herself as a survivor rather than a participant. She sold everything she could. The Valentino dresses, the Louboutin heels, the Chanel handbags, a jewelry collection that included a 3-carat diamond pendant Nathan had purchased with Compass Holdings money in 2022. She listed them on consignment platforms and posted unboxing videos in reverse. She called it a declutter journey. She called it healing. The internet was not convinced. Her follower count continued to fall. By the end of the second week after sentencing, she was below 80,000. The comments were not kind. People have long memories when they feel deceived. Coastal Influence Media was dissolved by court order. The LLC's remaining assets, approximately $31,000 in a business checking account, were seized by the federal government as proceeds of fraud. Sloane retained a family law attorney named Diane Yee, who negotiated a separation agreement that gave Sloane no claim to any Compass Holdings assets, no claim to the Mercer Island property, and no spousal support. There was nothing to claim. Everything Nathan had possessed belonged to me. Sloane walked away with the revenue from her consignment sales and whatever remained of her personal savings. According to Dex's final report, that total was approximately $14,000. I did not celebrate Sloane's fall. I did not track her movements after the divorce was finalized. She moved to Portland. Dex confirmed the address, but I told him to stop. She was no longer part of this story. She was a woman who had mistaken proximity to wealth for ownership of it. That mistake had cost her a marriage, a career, and a public identity. The consequences were sufficient. I had no appetite for more. What I did have an appetite for was something I had been thinking about since the morning I watched the fairies from my kitchen window. The morning after Nathan's arrest. The morning the coffee went cold and the gulls circled and the world refused to acknowledge that anything significant had happened. I had sat there thinking about what money actually means when there is no one left to spend it on. I called Victor on day 53. I told him I wanted to restructure Compass Holdings. He asked what I had in mind. I told him I wanted to liquidate approximately 90% of the portfolio and establish a charitable foundation. Victor was quiet for several seconds. Then he asked if I was sure. I said I had never been more sure of anything since the day I accepted my commission. The Brennan Maritime Foundation was incorporated in Washington State on day 61. Victor handled the legal architecture. The foundation's stated mission was to provide vocational training, transitional housing, and employment placement for military veterans re-entering civilian life. The initial endowment was $49.5 million. I retained $5.5 million in a personal trust to cover my living expenses for the remainder of my life. At 73, that was more than enough. It was more than most people see in 10 lifetimes. It was the right amount for a man who had learned the difference between enough and everything. The Foundation's first program was a maritime trades training center. I chose this because the sea was the only classroom that ever made sense to me. The center would offer 12-month certification courses in marine mechanics, navigation, harbor logistics, and commercial diving. Veterans would receive full tuition, housing stipends, and job placement assistance upon graduation. Victor connected me with a nonprofit administrator named Grace Huang, who had spent 15 years running veteran services programs in the Pacific Northwest. She agreed to serve as the Foundation's executive director. But the detail that mattered most to me was not the structure or the money or the mission statement. It was a man named Carlos Medina. Carlos was 58 years old. He had served as a machinist's mate aboard the USS Nimitz for 14 years, before a back injury forced a medical discharge in 2008. After leaving the Navy, Carlos worked a series of jobs that never matched his skills: warehouse clerk, night janitor, line cook. For the past 3 years, he had been washing dishes at a diner on Aurora Avenue in North Seattle, earning $11.75 an hour, plus a free meal per shift. I met Carlos through a veterans outreach program at the Seattle VA Medical Center. I had been volunteering there quietly for 2 years, something Nathan never knew about, and Sloan never bothered to ask. Carlos and I talked over coffee one afternoon. He told me about the Nimitz. He told me about the engine room, about the smell of diesel and salt, about the pride of keeping a nuclear carrier running. He told me he missed it every single day. He told me he felt invisible. I understood that feeling. When the Foundation's training center opened its enrollment on day 78, Carlos Medina was the first applicant. I personally reviewed his file. 14 years of naval engineering experience, a spotless service record, a man who could rebuild a gas turbine blindfolded but could not get hired above minimum wage because the civilian world did not know how to read a military resume. I called Carlos that evening. I told him he was accepted into the first cohort. There was a long silence on the line. Then he said, "Thank you, Admiral." Nobody had called me Admiral in years. The word felt like a hand reaching through the dark and finding something solid. I did not build the Brennan Maritime Foundation to redeem myself. I did not need redemption. I built it because $55 million sitting in a Zurich server meant nothing if it only served one family's comfort. Money is ammunition. You can spend it destroying things, or you can spend it building them. I had done enough destroying. It was time to build. I found the lighthouse on a Tuesday in March. It stood at the eastern tip of Nantucket Island, 37 feet tall, built from granite blocks in 1851. The lantern room had been dark for 26 years. The Coast Guard had decommissioned it in 1998 when the automated beacon on Brant Point made it redundant. The town had tried to maintain it as a historical landmark, but the salt air and the winters had won. The roof leaked. The gallery railing had rusted through. The keeper's cottage beside it had lost its front door to a nor'easter in 2019, and nobody had replaced it. I bought it for $380,000. Cash. The Nantucket Historical Commission required the buyer to commit to a full restoration within 18 months. I committed to 12. Victor handled the paperwork from Seattle. I flew to Massachusetts on a Wednesday morning with one suitcase and a duffel bag that held everything I needed: 2 pairs of boots, 4 flannel shirts, a wool peacoat I had owned since my first posting at Naval Station Norfolk in 1976, and a framed photograph of Nathan at age 7. Standing on the bow of my sailboat, squinting into the sun with a grin so wide it could split the horizon. I kept that photograph because memory is not the same as forgiveness. I had not forgiven Nathan. I was not sure I ever would. But I remembered the boy he had been before he became the man who tried to take my mind. That boy deserved a place on my shelf even if the man deserved a cell in Sheridan. The restoration took 4 months. I hired a local contractor named Tom Albright, who had restored 3 other lighthouses on the Cape and Islands. Tom was 65, quiet, built like a dock piling, and did not ask unnecessary questions. He brought a crew of 6. I worked alongside them every day. I carried granite. I stripped rust. I sanded the gallery railing by hand until my palms bled and healed and bled again. The physical work was a kind of medicine that no doctor could prescribe. Every bolt I tightened was a thought I no longer needed to carry. Every coat of paint covered something I was ready to let go. The keeper's cottage was finished first. 3 rooms. A kitchen with a cast-iron stove. A bedroom that faced the Atlantic. A living room with a stone fireplace and windows on 3 sides. I furnished it simply. A wooden table, 2 chairs, a bookshelf filled with navigation manuals and poetry collections, a radio that picked up the Coast Guard Weather Channel, and not much else. I did not install a television. I did not want one. Grace Huang flew from Seattle to Nantucket on day 140 to present the Foundation's first quarterly report. The numbers were strong. 47 veterans had enrolled in the Maritime Trades Program. 39 had completed the first certification module. Carlos Medina had finished his marine mechanics course with the highest score in the cohort. He had already received 2 job offers from commercial shipping companies in Puget Sound. Grace told me Carlos had turned down both. He wanted to stay with the program as a peer mentor for the next cohort. He said he was not ready to leave yet. He said the program felt like a ship, and he wanted to help the new crew find their footing. I asked Grace to give Carlos the title of lead instructor for the mechanics division. She smiled and said she had already drafted the offer letter. The lantern room was the last piece of the restoration. Tom and I climbed the 73 iron steps together on a Saturday morning in May. The original Fresnel lens had been removed in 1998 and was sitting in a maritime museum in Boston. I did not try to recover it. Instead, I installed a modern LED beacon rated for 22 nautical miles. It was not romantic. It was not historic. But it worked. And in my experience, the things that work matter more than the things that look beautiful. I switched the beacon on at sunset. The light turned slowly, casting a white arc across the dark Atlantic. Tom stood beside me on the gallery and watched it sweep the water. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "That is a fine light, Art." I said, "Yes, it is." The letter from Nathan arrived on day 162. It was handwritten on lined paper, the kind they provide at federal facilities. The handwriting was smaller than I remembered. Tighter, more careful, as though each word had been weighed before the pen touched the page. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not apologize. He wrote 3 paragraphs about the routine at Sheridan. He described the food. He described the yard. He described a library that had a copy of Patrick O'Brien's Master and Commander. And he said he had started reading it because it reminded him of the stories I used to tell about life at sea. He said he was learning things about himself that he did not enjoy learning. He said the quiet was difficult, but that he was beginning to understand why I had always preferred it. The last line of the letter read, "I understand now why you love the ocean. It does not care who you are. It only cares what you can do." I read the letter twice. Then I folded it and placed it on the shelf beside the photograph. The boy squinting into the sun. The man writing from a cell. 2 versions of the same person separated by 25 years and choices that could not be undone. I did not write back. Not yet. Some silences need to last long enough to mean something. That night I sat in the keeper's cottage, with the fire burning low and the beacon turning overhead. The light swept across the water in steady intervals. 3 seconds of brightness. 3 seconds of dark. A rhythm as old as the sea itself. I listened to the waves against the rocks below and thought about what it means to build a light in a place where everything has gone dark. I did not build this lighthouse to be seen. I built it so that others could find their way. The beacon turned. The Atlantic breathed. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, the silence felt like enough.